How many of you love the first day of things? And what I mean by that is like first day of school. No. The first day of school can be rough for several reasons. Right? It means the end of summer, means no more sleeping in late, means suddenly having to do homework again. But for some people, the worst parts of the first day take place in the classes where they ask you to share about yourself. Right? It's an introvert's nightmare. And while there are some extroverts who live for moments like these, there are a lot of people that's just not the case. Ultimately, though, this type of get to know you exercise is for everyone in the group to share a piece of their identity with everyone else so you have a better understanding of who each person is. But one person might say they're on the soccer team. Another person might say they love to do theater. And still another person might say they are the youngest sibling in their family. But what's really interesting to me is that so often these instructions or introductions actually say more about the person's community than the actual person. Saying you're on a soccer team tells me about the people that you surround yourself with. And I think that this is because each of us were created to live life with other people. And here at Bearing Cross, we believe that being part of a faith community is one of the best ways to do that. In fact, it's the second point of our purpose statement. Find community, right? Last week, we began our new series, Who We Are, by talking about the differences between big church and little church. Big C church, which includes all Christ followers around the world, and little C church, which we would consider our group here. And then we talked about why it's so important to be a part of a little C church like ours. Now, I want to be clear. I am not saying that our little C church is any better than any other little C church, okay? The important thing is that you find a community of Christ followers who care about you and who want to see you grow in your relationship with Jesus, and you get plugged in. Tonight, we're going to talk about how the local church is intended to be a community of people with a common goal, and what it looks like for you to connect in a way that is beneficial for both you and the community as a whole. So let's jump into the book of Hebrews, where the author gives us a clear image of what it looks like to live in community together. So check out Hebrews chapter 10 and verse 24. It says, "Let us think of ways to motivate one another to acts of love and good works." Now, I love this. When I think of our group, I sincerely hope that this is a place where everyone is able to be encouraged by others so that we might be able to love and meet the needs of the world around us. And if that were it, we could just pack right up and go home right now. But that's not the end of the passage. You see, the author of Hebrews found one very specific hiccup in the equation. There's one sure way to completely derail the whole process. So let's keep reading. Hebrews chapter 10 and verse 25 says, "And let us not neglect our meeting together, as some people do, but encourage one another, especially now that the day of his return is drawing near." The truth is, it can be pretty difficult to find and maintain motivation for acts of love and good works without the encouragement and support of other people who care about us and share our hope in Jesus. That's why our meeting together on a regular basis is so important. You see, as we follow Jesus, we need to be surrounded by others who will motivate us and encourage us in our faith. We need to be surrounded by people who will motivate us and encourage us in our faith. When we neglect meeting together, holding on to hope becomes much harder. Additionally, when we neglect meeting together, it's less likely that we will hold on to that hope for the long haul. Plain and simple, it's easy to get discouraged when we try and follow Jesus by ourselves. The Christian walk is not meant to be a Lone Ranger thing. We're in this together. We need each other. But before we get any further, I have to call out those 4 words that are right in the middle of verse 25. Let's read it again. And let us not neglect our meeting together as some people do, but encourage one another, especially now that the day of his return is drawing near. As some people do. Do you notice those 4 words? Have you ever seen a sign with a rule that didn't make sense until you realize someone must have done the thing that is now written on that sign because it's now against the rules? Let me give you a couple of examples. Here's a sign at a vegan restaurant that says absolutely no outside food or drink, including but not limited to a whole rotisserie chicken, Burgerville burgers for your friend who won't eat vegetables. And yes, we are also surprised that we had to make this sign. That's outside a vegan restaurant. How about a sign in a public park that says, warning, feed a pigeon, lose a finger? Or a sign at the Oakland Museum of California that says, don't lick the paintings. Help us care for our California art. Yeah, those rules are all in place because someone brought a whole rotisserie chicken into a vegan restaurant. Someone lost a finger feeding a pigeon, and someone, for some unknown reason, decided to lick a painting. I think something similar is going on here in our passage. My best guess is that the author challenges the readers to not neglect meeting together because that's exactly what they were doing. They weren't making their community a priority, and it was making it more and more difficult for them to motivate one another to acts of love and good works. I think the author of Hebrews knows something that's also worth learning here, and that is that we are better together than we ever could be on our own. But when we go too long without hanging out together, we start to feel less and less like a community. So even though this letter was written around 1900 years ago to a group of people who are certainly no longer alive, I still think that there are a few things that we can find helpful if we're willing to recognize them and apply them to our lives today. And the first is this: prioritizing community is a choice. And I'll be the first to admit that it's not always easy to build community. Getting to know other people means being vulnerable. And that's not always the most comfortable thing to do in the world. In fact, there are a lot of times that it would be easier to stay on the outside, never quite getting close enough to build a real lasting relationship or relationships. But easier is not always better. And this is definitely one of those cases. Being a part of a community that loves and encourages each other is a process. It doesn't happen all in one day, but you do have to start somewhere. And that starting point is prioritizing the community that you want to be a part of. But again, it all starts with a choice, a decision to make community a priority. And when we decide to connect to a church or a student ministry, we also must make a decision to prioritize it. And that means making the choice to be here when you are able. The second thing that I think might be helpful for us to learn from this passage is authentic community is unselfish. Let's look again at that passage from Hebrews chapter 10. It says, let us think of ways to motivate one another to acts of love and good works. And let us not neglect our meeting together, as some people do, but encourage one another, especially now that the day of his return is drawing near. See, notice the emphasis is on what each person can contribute to their faith community not what they can get out of it. Community is unselfish. You have something to contribute that nobody else has. Whether you've been here for years or this is your first time here joining us, you have a role in our group. And when you choose not to be a part of it, everyone else misses out. But when we all show up and we bring our full selves, everyone benefits, including you. The whole group is better because each of us made a conscious decision to put our community first. But what does that mean for us today? What can we do? What steps can we take to help our community grow? To make sure that our community continues to grow into the type of community that the author of Hebrews wrote about. But before I answer that question, before we look at the steps that I'm going to give you, let me say this. Community like we are talking about doesn't just happen by accident. It takes each person in our group deciding that this is the type of community they want. So if that's what you want, and I hope it's what you really do want, here are a few steps that you can take to make our church, right, our student ministry, the type of community for your entire group. Number one, make church a priority. And I'll be the first to admit, this is a tough one. Yours is probably the busiest generation of teenagers that there ever has been because there are more options fighting for your attention than ever before. From sports, to band, to theater, to homework, to jobs, to volunteering for service hours, there are more than enough potential priorities fighting for your attention every single day. And in the midst of all of that, you have your friends, you have your family, you have your hobbies, you have entertainment. The list literally never stops. Now, on one hand, that's an awesome thing because you will likely have more opportunities than previous generations would have ever thought possible. But on the other hand, that means you regularly have to make choices about how you are going to spend your time. For you, saying yes to one thing usually means saying no to another thing or multiple things. But please hear me. This is not a guilt trip into you choosing coming to church instead of playing baseball or auditioning for the upcoming musical. In fact, it's quite the opposite. If you have the opportunity to do those things, I want to encourage you to go for it. But here's the catch. When you're there, share the gospel. Be the light that you are supposed to be. God has placed you at that moment for a purpose. So yes, church attendance is a thing. But it's about a relationship with Jesus. It's not about butts in the seat. And as you make those choices to decide how to spend your time, I want to encourage you to make sure that your church is also a priority. And here's what I mean. If you can be here, be here. This one's pretty self-explanatory. But one way to make your church a priority is to choose to be here every time that you can. And then only miss when it's important. We get it. Stuff comes up. Life happens. If there's something important going on, we're not asking you to skip that important thing in order to be here. But remember, it's up to you to decide what's important. And then follow up when you're not here. One of the best ways to show the group that this is a priority in your life is to check in with them if they've missed or if you've missed a week. And it doesn't have to be anything overly complicated. Shoot someone a text and say, hey, missed you this week. Or man, what did I miss at youth group? Right? Stuff like that goes a long way when you're building community together. And also a shameless plug here, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Because if you miss a message, you don't want to be behind. But that's what it's there for. Another big step that you can take to help make sure that your church is the type of community that Hebrews 10 is talking about is to choose honesty. Choose honesty. And here's where it's going to get a little deep tonight. What I mean by that is when you are here at church or in student ministry, you're going to have to choose between two options. You have option A, bringing your full self, your full honest self to the table, or you have option B, which is hiding who you really are and pretending to be someone you're not. And I know how difficult it can be to allow yourself to be honest and vulnerable with others, but I'm speaking from my own experience when I tell you that you are in a safe and caring environment. And option A is always the best choice. I think it can be easy for us to want to pretend that we're okay when we're not okay. Or sometimes it's just easier to go with the flow and agree with the student pastor or the pastor, even though we don't. Or other times we might hold back our real thoughts and opinions back in discussions because we're afraid that others might judge us. And I want you to know that if you have ever felt that way when you are here, I want to apologize. I am sorry. Our goal here is to create an environment where everyone feels safe and comfortable being their true self. We don't want anyone to feel like they have to hide just to fit in. And I want to be absolutely clear. No one is perfect. Not a single person in this room is perfect. In fact, we are all pretty far from it. But what unites us is that we are trying to figure things out. We are deciding to do life together. But we can't do that unless we are honest with each other. The Apostle Paul gets pretty blunt here in his letter to the Ephesians church, and he says it this way in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 25, where he says, "Stop telling lies. Let us tell our neighbors the truth, for we are all parts of the same body." He's basically saying that what we are trying to accomplish is the same thing. We are all trying to figure out this life together and better understand our own relationship with God in the process. But we can't do that if we are not willing to be honest when we're here. And the last thing that we can do to help our community grow is to encourage each other. Encourage each other, and this part is absolutely crucial. Imagine for a moment that someone in our student ministry decides to be completely honest for the very first time. How you respond as a group will determine whether that person will feel safe being honest in the future. So when someone shares something that's honest and from the heart, I want to challenge you to decide ahead of time how you will respond and how you will encourage that person instead of judging them and making them feel ashamed of what they've shared. For example, if someone in our Sunday school class decides to share that they aren't really sure whether or not they really believe in Jesus, a great response might be, "I get it. And I just want you to know that we are trying to figure this out together, and this is a safe place for us to discuss questions like that. And we're glad you're here so that we can figure things out together." Or if someone shares that they are struggling with being angry, even when they know it's not helpful, a great response might be, "Thank you for being honest. This is a struggle for a lot of us, but I know we have a better chance of being less angry when we're able to show and share how we feel. Would it be okay if I check in on you during the week to see how it's going?" Okay, the way you respond makes all of the difference. The author of Hebrews seems to think that offering each other encouragement is the way to go. And I have to say that I completely agree. Let's do this together because, again, we are better together than we ever could be on our own.